before the ocean. My name is Eleanor Martin. I am 70 years old. And if you ask me today what the most important thing I ever learned was, I wouldn't tell you it was about money. It wasn't about success. It wasn't even about family. It was about time. Time is the one thing we spend without realizing we are spending it. When I was 20, I thought 70 was impossibly far away. When I was 40, I thought I still had decades to do everything I wanted. When I was 60, I realized how quickly the years had disappeared. And now, at 70, I understand something that I wish someone had told me when I was young. The ordinary days are the days you will miss the most. Not the expensive vacations. Not the fancy dinners. Not the important meetings. The ordinary mornings. The burnt pancakes. The children's laughter. The sound of your husband's keys hitting the table after work. Your sister shouting from another room. A Christmas tree that is too large for the living room. A family arguing over a board game. A little girl asking you for another bedtime story. Those are the moments that stay. And before I tell you how I ended up living beside the ocean, I need to take you back to where everything began. The little house in Ohio. I was born in 1956 in a small Ohio town. Our house was nothing special. The paint was peeling. The porch leaned slightly to one side. The kitchen window refused to close properly. And every winter, my father complained about the heating bill. But to me, it was the most beautiful place in the world. My mother, Margaret, could make almost anything feel warm. She would put flowers in an old glass jar. She would bake bread when we couldn't afford anything special. She would light a candle at dinner even when we were eating leftovers. I once asked her why. Because dinner feels better when there is a candle. That was my mother. She didn't have much. But she knew how to make little things matter. My father, Thomas, worked at a repair shop. He came home every evening smelling like oil and metal. Sometimes he was exhausted. Sometimes he was frustrated. But whenever he walked through the door, he would raise his hands and say, "Where are my girls?" Sarah and I would run toward him. I was the older one. Sarah was 2 years younger. And we were completely different. I was quiet. Sarah was trouble. Wonderful trouble. If there was a broken window, Sarah probably knew something about it. If there was a missing cookie, Sarah probably ate it. And if there was a punishment coming, Sarah somehow managed to convince everyone that I had started it. The ocean. When I was 12, I found a magazine. It had a picture of the ocean on the front. I had never seen anything like it. The water looked endless. I sat on the floor staring at the photograph. Sarah walked in. "What are you doing?" "Looking at the ocean." "You've never seen the ocean." "I know." "Then how do you know you like it?" "I don't." She laughed. "I think you're weird." I smiled. "Maybe." Then I pointed to the photograph. "I'm going there someday." Sarah crossed her arms. "Fine." "Fine what?" "If you go, I'll go too." I laughed. We shook hands. Neither of us knew that decades later, that promise would become important. Margaret Lewis. Next door lived an elderly widow named Margaret Lewis. She was probably 65 at the time. To me, that seemed incredibly old. Now that I am 70, I laugh at that memory. Mrs. Lewis lived alone. My mother often sent me over with food. One day I asked, "Why does she always sit outside?" My mother answered, "Because she doesn't want to feel invisible." I didn't understand. Not then. Mrs. Lewis became one of the first people to teach me about loneliness. She also had a wicked sense of humor. One afternoon, she looked at my dress and said, "Eleanor, who dressed you?" "My mother." "Well, tell her we need to have a meeting." I ran home laughing. My mother was offended. Then she saw the dress. She laughed too. Sarah's secret. When Sarah was 16, she began working secretly after school. I didn't understand why. One evening I found her counting money. What is that? Nothing. Sarah. Go away. I sat beside her. Eventually she told me. Our father was in debt. The repair shop wasn't doing well. He had borrowed money. He hadn't told Mom. Sarah was trying to help. I was shocked. You're only 16. She shrugged. Someone has to help Dad. That was the first time I realized my little sister wasn't just trouble. She was brave. Much braver than I had ever understood. The diner. At 22, I met James. It happened in a small diner. He ordered coffee, toast, eggs. Every morning. Same table. Same time. One morning, I accidentally spilled coffee near him. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. He looked at the coffee. Then at me. Then he smiled. I've survived worse. I laughed. That was our first real conversation. The next morning, he sat at my table. Good morning. You're sitting in my seat. He looked around. There are 20 empty seats. I like this one. He smiled. Then I guess I'll have to share. That was James. He didn't try to impress me. He simply made me laugh. The first date. Our first date was not romantic. We went to a cheap movie theater. James bought popcorn. Halfway through the movie, he dropped it. Everywhere. I looked at him. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Then we started laughing. The couple in front of us turned around. James whispered. Sorry. I whispered. Stop laughing. He whispered. You're laughing too. I whispered. Because you're ridiculous. He smiled. I know. After the movie, we walked home. He said. Did you have a good time? I said. Yes. Even with the popcorn disaster? Especially because of it. The proposal. James proposed 1 year later. He took me to the same diner where we first met. I thought he was taking me there because he was hungry. He wasn't. He reached into his pocket. I stared. What's that? A ring. My heart stopped. James. He smiled. I can't promise you a perfect life. I started crying. But I can promise I'll stand beside you through the imperfect one. I said yes. Our wedding. Our wedding was small. Sarah cried more than I did. My mother cried. My father pretended he wasn't crying. James's best friend Henry gave a speech that lasted far too long. At one point, he said, James has always been a very responsible man. James looked at him. Henry paused. Usually, everyone laughed. After the wedding, James whispered, Are you happy? I said, Very. He kissed my forehead. Good. The first apartment. Our first apartment was tiny. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people. The bathroom door didn't close properly. And the upstairs neighbor had a habit of vacuuming at midnight. James called him the midnight cleaner. One night I said, Maybe we should move. James said, We can't afford it. Then what do we do? He smiled. Laugh. So we laughed. We had very little money. But we had each other. And somehow that was enough. Daniel. Daniel was born first. The first time I held him, I was terrified. He was so small. James looked at him. He's perfect. He's tiny. Perfectly tiny. Daniel became the center of our lives. He cried at night. He threw food. He learned to walk by pulling himself up on furniture. And one morning, he walked directly toward James. James froze. Eleanor. What? He's walking. I see him. He's walking. Daniel took 3 steps. Then fell. We both cheered like he had won the Olympics. Emily. Emily came 2 years later. She was completely different from Daniel. Daniel was loud. Emily was observant. She watched everything. She learned to read early. She loved books. One evening, she asked, "Mom, where do stories go when you finish reading them?" I smiled. "They stay with you." She thought about that. I like that. Years later, I would remember those words. Stories stay with you. Even when people don't. The pancake disaster. One Saturday morning, James decided to make breakfast. That should have been my warning. I walked into the kitchen. Smoke everywhere. A pancake was stuck to the ceiling. I stared. James smiled. "Good morning." "How?" I flipped it. "With what?" "A little enthusiasm." Daniel laughed. Emily pointed upward. "Daddy made a pancake moon." We laughed until we cried. James eventually admitted, "I think breakfast is your department." I said, "I think that's the smartest thing you've ever said." Christmas. Our first Christmas with both children was chaos. The tree was too large. The lights stopped working. Daniel opened a present early. Emily caught him. They argued. James tried to fix the lights. He received a small electric shock. He jumped. I screamed. He said, "I'm fine." Sarah, who was visiting, said, "That's what every man says before making something worse." James looked offended. "You're not helping." Sarah smiled. "I know. That Christmas was messy. But it was wonderful." The road trip. When Daniel was 10 and Emily was 8, we went on a family road trip. Daniel asked, "Are we there yet?" 5 minutes later. "Now. Then. Now." Finally, James said, "If you ask again, I'm going to turn the car around." Daniel became quiet. For approximately 30 seconds. Then Emily asked, "Are we there yet?" James looked at me. I couldn't stop laughing. At the next gas station, we bought sandwiches. Daniel lost his. He blamed Emily. Emily blamed the wind. There was no wind. James said, "Maybe the sandwich escaped." Daniel seriously searched for it. For the next hour. The summer by the lake. One summer, we rented a tiny cabin near a lake. It wasn't fancy. There were mosquitoes. The shower barely worked. The refrigerator made a strange noise. But we had 3 wonderful days. James taught Daniel how to fish. Emily collected stones. I cooked outside. One evening, we sat together watching the sunset. James held my hand. "This is what I wanted." "What?" "This." He looked at the children. "You. All of us." I smiled. I didn't know it then. But that memory would become one of the most important memories of my life. James and the dance. James hated dancing. But at a neighborhood party, he decided he could dance. He grabbed my hand. I said, "You can't dance." "I can." "You absolutely cannot." He started moving. I laughed. "You look like you're fighting an invisible bear." He laughed too. Then he spun me around. I nearly fell. Everyone applauded. That night I thought, if I grow old with this man, I will never be bored. I was right. The dream house. James had one dream. A little house near the ocean. He found a photograph in a magazine. He put it inside our bedroom drawer. "One day," he said. I laughed. "We'll never afford it." "Maybe. But I'll keep trying." We would talk about that house for years. Sometimes we joked about it. Sometimes we seriously planned. Sometimes we simply imagined. It became our secret dream. Daniel's motorcycle. When Daniel was 15, he secretly learned to ride a motorcycle. I discovered it. "Daniel." He froze. "Mom. What is that?" He looked at the motorcycle. Then at me. "A bicycle? A very large bicycle?" "Yes." I called James. James came outside. He looked at Daniel, then at the motorcycle, then at me. Finally, he said, "Wear a helmet." I stared at him. "That's your response?" James shrugged. "I was young once." I laughed. Daniel smiled. I knew then I was raising two boys. One of them just happened to be my husband. Emily's bookstore. Emily got her first job at a bookstore. She loved it. One day she came home carrying 23 books. I stared at her. "Emily." "Yes. You spent your paycheck on books?" She smiled. "They were discounted." "How much?" She told me. I shook my head. "You are definitely my daughter." She laughed. The last summer James and I spent together was peaceful. We went to the lake again. We ate outside. We watched the sunset. He held my hand. He looked older. I didn't say anything. He smiled. "What?" "Nothing. You're staring at me. I like looking at you." He laughed. "After all these years? Especially after all these years." He squeezed my hand. Then he said, "Eleanor, promise me something." "What?" "If something ever happens to me." I immediately interrupted him. "Don't." He smiled sadly. "Just listen." I looked at him. He continued. "Don't stop living." I didn't understand why he was saying it. I didn't want to. So I changed the subject. We talked about the ocean, about the house, about the children, about the future. That night, James kissed my forehead. "Good night. Good night." Those were the last ordinary words we ever exchanged. The phone call. The phone rang the next evening. I answered. A voice asked, "Is this Eleanor Martin?" "Yes. I'm calling from the hospital." I don't remember the rest. I remember dropping the phone. I remember Sarah arriving. I remember Daniel crying. I remember Emily asking, "Mom, what's happening?" I remember the hospital hallway. The smell. The lights. The silence. And then, the doctor came toward me. He didn't need to say anything. I knew. James was gone. The man who had made me laugh. The man who had danced badly with me. The man who promised to take me to the ocean. The man who had held my hand through every difficult year. Was gone. The empty chair. After the funeral, the house became silent. Daniel stopped talking. Emily stayed in her room. Sarah came every day. I tried to cook. I couldn't. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. One evening, I walked into the kitchen. There were 4 chairs. But only 3 people remained. I touched James's chair. And I remembered the pancake. The Christmas tree. The lake. The road trip. The dancing. I sat down. For the first time since his death. I smiled. Then I cried. Because grief is strange. Sometimes you cry because someone is gone. And sometimes you cry because you remember how happy you once were with them. The promise. Weeks after the funeral, I found the photograph of the ocean house. I held it in my hands. On the back, James had written, "Someday." I stared at that word. Then I whispered, "You promised." I put the photograph back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I still had children to raise, bills to pay, a life to survive. So I put the dream away. I put the photograph in the drawer. And I closed it. I had no idea that years later, I would open that drawer again. And what I found inside would change everything. The life after James. The years after James were difficult. I worked. I raised Daniel and Emily. I paid bills. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when I had to. Sometimes I cried when nobody was watching. But there were happy moments too. Daniel graduated. Emily got her first job. Sarah visited. We celebrated birthdays. We laughed. We made mistakes. Life continued. That is the strange thing about grief. The world doesn't stop because your heart has. The sun still rises. People still go to work. Children still laugh. Stores still open. Cars still drive past your house. And slowly, you learn how to breathe again. The first sign of change. Daniel eventually started a business. It failed. He called me one night. "Mom, I lost everything." I asked, "How much do you need?" He told me. It was almost all my savings. I gave it to him. He said, "I can't take this." I smiled. "You're not taking it." "What?" "I'm investing in my son." He cried. He hugged me. And for a while, I believed nothing could ever come between us. I was wrong. But I wouldn't discover that for many years. Emily leaves home. Emily moved to New York. The day she left, I helped her carry boxes. She hugged me at the door. "Mom." "Yes." "Are you going to be okay?" I smiled. "I'll be fine." She nodded. Then she said, "I'm going to miss you." "I'll miss you too." She got into the car. I stood on the porch. The car disappeared down the road. I waved until I couldn't see it anymore. Then I went inside. The house was quiet again. But this time, I knew quiet could become permanent. The woman I became. Years passed. Daniel became successful. Emily built a career. I became older. My hair turned gray, then white. My children became adults. Their lives became complicated. My phone rang less often. Visits became shorter. Thanksgivings became difficult to arrange. I told myself, "They're busy." I said, "That's life." And perhaps it was. But somewhere inside me, a small voice kept asking, when did being their mother stop being part of their lives? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. The Thanksgiving dinner. At 65, I prepared Thanksgiving dinner. I cooked everything. I cleaned the house. I put flowers on the table. I wore the blue dress James loved. I waited. 5 o'clock. 6. 7. Nobody came. Daniel called. "Mom, I'm sorry." I smiled even though he couldn't see me. "It's okay. Next time." "Of course." I hung up. Then I looked at the empty chairs. For a moment, I saw James. I imagined him sitting there. I laughed softly. "You would have hated this turkey." Then I started crying. The papers. A few months later, Daniel came to my house. He brought papers. He wanted me to sell the house. He said I was getting older. He said I needed somewhere safer. He said he was only trying to help. I listened. Then I said, "No." He stared at me. "Mom." "No. You're being difficult." I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I'm making a decision for myself. He became angry. He left. The door closed. I stood there alone. But something inside me felt different. I wasn't frightened. I was free. The attic. That night, I went into the attic. I opened an old wooden chest. Inside were photographs. Letters. My mother's notebook. Daniel's first drawing. Emily's first book. Charlie's old collar. And finally, the photograph of the ocean house. But underneath it was something else. A sealed envelope. My name was written on it. Eleanor. I held it in my hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. I had no idea who had written it. I had no idea why it had been hidden. And I certainly didn't know that the contents of that envelope would eventually lead me to a place I had never imagined visiting. I looked at the ocean photograph again. Then at the envelope. And for the first time in decades, I wondered whether James had left me more than a memory. Maybe. He had left me a road. A road I had never been brave enough to follow. I sat on the attic floor. The house was silent. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. I held the envelope against my chest and whispered, "James, what did you leave behind?" I didn't open it that night. Instead, I put it back inside the wooden chest. I closed the lid and went downstairs. But I didn't know that the next morning, someone would knock on my door. Someone I had never met. A stranger carrying a message that would connect my mother's past, Sarah's secret, James's dream, and my own future. And when that stranger finally told me why he had come, I realized my story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. To be continued.